Welcome to Jung at HARP, episode 84, which is about fulfilling our dreams, reality, and fantasy. What did we think it was going to be like? What is it actually like? I'm Deborah Henson-Conant, also known as Deborah Henson-Conant. This is Kathleen Wiley, and I'm a composer and a performer, and Kathleen is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, so we call this Jung at HARP. And it's all about the experiences of psychology and being an artist and how they, where they come into each other. This is a conversation. So we don't come here to like tell you how to do it. We come here for discovery. We come here with a question. So we invite you to join us. And it's kind of like if you were at a cafe and you overheard a conversation between two people at a table next to you, and you get to listen in, but you also get to actually step over there and put in your comments or your questions. So today we're talking about fulfilling our dreams. And Kathleen suggested this in part because of what I'm going through, in that I started writing a musical many years ago, and many years ago, decades ago. And then that musical got deferred and deferred because of wonderful things happening in my life, because I started playing the harp, and then the harp took over, and then that took me on an incredible adventure. But I have never, ever, ever lost my passion for this story of this musical. And so now this musical has been selected for a series in New York City. It's going to be presented in April, and we're also going beyond that and filming it with the intent of submitting it to a wonderful something called streaming musicals, which is, if you think of HBO meets original musicals, that's what that is. So this is the moment of taking this fantasy that I've been building for years and years and years, and turning it into a reality that's not just in a beautiful, moment in New York City live, which is incredible, but also that could reach the whole world. And that's the fantasy, and it's becoming a reality. But then there's a lot that's coming with it. And one of the things that I'm realizing is that when we have a dream, and it's been there for a long time, and we've left it there, and there's many reasons. For me, there was a lot of fear. I didn't know how to navigate all the logistics of making this happen. They don't go away. And so when we do actually start to open that up, they come along with it. And there's actually a moment in this play, The Golden Cage, where that all happens. And so I feel like I'm living that part of the play. So I just kind of wanted to, I'm happy to talk all about that, blah, 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 blah. And I will be talking about that over the next couple of months in a series called How I Built the Golden Cage, which I'm just beta testing this weekend, but so I can share more about the process. But Kathleen, I'm going through this experience right now. I'm sure that you've been through it. What do you, and okay, I'm going to talk just a little bit more before I bring you in, because you said something right before that I really loved. So I feel like there's a part of this play, and this play is about a bird person who's been searching his entire life for this, the legendary golden cage, which is the place where all dreams come true. And he finally finds it. It's everything he ever dreamt of, except for one thing. There's this grumpy, reclusive diva who's living in the cage, who's stuck in the cage. And she says it's made of cement and iron, and that she's a prisoner. So they have completely different perceptions of this cage. And there's a point in which she actually, he gets in, he gets her out. She begs to be pushed off the cliff. He pushes her off the cliff, and she crashes. And I feel like and yet it is that moment of crashing down the cliff that ultimately is her moment of transformation. And I feel like I'm crashing down the cliff right now, and having asked to be pushed. So you had something really beautiful to say about that from Jung, Kathleen. So I'm now turning it over to you.
Yeah, your experience is so what happens when we get rescued from isolation and restored to wholeness. This is what happens. All of a sudden, our world expands. And whereas we've had this wonderful golden cage that also becomes cement and stone because we don't let anything else in, we don't take anything else in, we don't venture outside of our comfort zone. When we venture outside of our comfort zone, all of a sudden we crash into things. We bump up against other people's ideas, we bump up against legalities, we bump up against requirements, we bump up against other people's needs, all kinds of things that we bump up against that are a challenge. And that typically are not a part of our fantasy about what it's going to look like when our dream is fulfilled. Um, and so to be
Right.
able to move forward, we really have to have enough ego strength. And you were saying this before we started live. You have to have enough ego strength to be able to say, okay, I know I'm going to bump into things. I know I may get bruised up. I know it's going to be a high learning curve, but I want to go. Somebody just push me. I'm ready. I won't take the step by myself, but a little nudge and I'll do it. And it requires, I think, a tremendous amount of grace and compassion with ourselves and being able to not make it bad or make us wrong or make us deficient because we have a learning curve or because we're getting bruised up because we're just not used to the lay of the land. We didn't, it's like when you move your furniture around and you get up in the middle of the night in the dark and you bump into something and you think, nothing used to be there, but now there's something there.
That's wow, that's really powerful. Um, that's powerful. I mean, I keep going back to all the images in this play because
Mm-hmm.
the golden cage is basically in the 500,000 feet in the air on the middle of a sheer granite cliff. There is nothing to stumble into. And you're right that as soon as we open up the possibility of our world and we
Yeah.
step out and we get help
Mm-hmm.
actually in pushing us further, there is all of this stuff to stumble on.
Right.
And for years I've been like, oh, the golden cage, blah blah, it's going to be great, blah blah blah, and it was just this big fantasy that was all about me, all about the thing
Mm-hmm.
I created, with no awareness of the other people who and as you were speaking, I was thinking of this one point of the play. It is the crux for one of the characters. It's actually the crux for both of the characters. When this woman who's been in, and it may not
Mm-hmm.
even be a woman because the genders are fluid in this, but let's just say it's a woman. She gets shoved off the cliff, begging to do it. She crashes down. And there's a moment of surrender, and it's one of my favorite moments of the play, because she says, and I've probably said it here before, she says, I saw the ground, I saw it race, the ground was galloping like stallions at my face. I was a
Mm-hmm.
fool. How could I leap? How could I ever have believed? How could I leave it all behind? And now it's gone, gone, gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then she says, and so, and so I opened up my arms to embrace the end of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I hung above the earth. I hung above the earth. Instead of ground, I felt the air, the lift of wind. The wind was everywhere, and I was lifted to the sky. And that's when she realizes her true nature, and she actually transforms back to who she was. She transformed to who she had left behind. And
Right.
and as you were speaking just now, I was thinking, because I feel like this play has been a navigation for my life and I've been
Mm-hmm.
living it. What is that wind? And I thought,
Mm.
that is the wind of other people. That is the wind of that is the energy and the lift and there may be turbulence. Yeah, sure, there may be turbulence, but that is the other people. Because if you're in a vacuum, there is no air, there is no I don't think you can fly in a vacuum. Maybe you can. I don't know. Never tried it. um, anyway,
Yeah,
that's what.
it's interesting you're bringing up what is the air, because this morning I was reading Jung about his 15 or 20 definitions going back through the use of the word spirit and what does spirit mean. And of course, from a psychological perspective, he he's looking, and as a psychoanalyst, I'm always looking for the spirit within one's own nature. What is that dynamic, vivifying, energizing, life-giving force that flows through you to be Deborah, or through me to be Kathleen, or through Pauline to be Pauline, and whomever else is with us today. And he talks that there are many different kinds of air or spirit, and one of them is what he calls the spirit of the times. And in a way, where you are right now is being carried by the spirit of the times, with this collective that's come together to perform the Golden Cage off Broadway in New York. And so there is like this spirit of the group, a spirit of the collective that's carrying you. But there's also throughout your life been this spirit that is unique to you, Deborah. And now part of what's happening is your spirit's interacting with all these other unique spirits. And there's this collective force that is created in the process. It's like the mathematical principle of the whole, the sum is greater. What is it? The whole is
Right,
greater
the
than the
sum is
sum of
greater
the
than
parts.
the whole. Right, the whole is
Yeah.
greater.
And so that
Yeah,
there's something being created, and there's something that's created when people come together that's greater, meaning more expansive, that's broader, that's deeper, that's wider than the individual.
yeah, and I want to bring up Pauline's comments in a second because they're really
Yeah.
beautiful. And I want to also say that within our little cage, the air may be outside, the breeze may be outside, we're safe. There is turbulence once we're in the air.
Right.
And I wanted to pull this up because I really love
Oh,
this because
thank you.
I really feel like it epitomizes the beauty of why Kathleen and I are here together. And I
Mm.
think sometimes my job is to come and say, "My God, I found this bizarre thing. What is it?" And then I mean, and then Kathleen, parses it out, which is really beautiful. So Pauline, thank you so much. Wait, or Kathleen, Pauline, thank you for putting that in so
Yeah.
beautifully and
And thank you.
succinctly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were saying something earlier, Kathleen. So I'm in the play. Um, when the characters want to do something, they can't, and they need to be pushed, and they beg to be pushed, and that's part of how they engage with each other. And you were talking about, and I have asked to be pushed into this. I
Right.
have, made some, and how do we push ourselves? We make a commitment. So I made a commitment with money. I made a commitment with
Mhm.
time. I made a commitment with people. There's all of that. That's how I often push myself. Otherwise, I'll sit in my cage forever. And you were talking about the pull. So there's the push that I
Right.
need, and then you were talking about the pull. And I really want to have you talk more about that because I think I just think there's something deep in there that's going to be helpful to everybody.
Yeah, in Jung's concept of our psyche, which he says is the totality of who we are, he says that every individual psyche has a gradient that the libido or the life force will follow if left unobstructed. So that each of us, our energy has a natural trajectory, but that trajectory often gets blocked, or it gets rechanneled vis-a-vis historical experiences we have, particularly as children, and things that we learn, and how we internalize dealing with our energies. So from a Jungian perspective, there is is a teleological, there is an energy, our own spirit that wants to pull us in a certain direction. And that there is also then the push of developmental task. I mean, think about how many things we've learned to do in life because developmentally we had to. I mean, when we went to first grade, we had to learn how to sit in a classroom and cooperate with others. I mean, there's a push with developmental or instinctive task, but there's also this pull of that spirit that is in the cage and wants out to fly. It doesn't want to be caught in a structure of stone and cement. That there is a spirit that wants to fly. And in a strange kind of way, as I understand it, both characters in your play, Boris and Althea, are really two sides of the same energy. They're really a whole. Together they make a whole. Yeah.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that,
In fact, I'll talk more about that in a minute, but yeah.
yeah. And so I think that as creatives and as musicians and artists and as human beings, I think every day we're always being worked by this force that wants to pull us to be something more than we are, that wants to pull us out of our prisons of cement and stone, our habit patterns, our distorted thinking, our stinking thinking, as the 12-step programs say. And we're also feeling this push within for something that wants to find an expression that is satisfying. And an expression that's satisfying versus an expression that's gratifying a system are different things. But that's for another day. To talk about the difference
I was just about to ask about that. Well, I do know there is an addictive quality to each of these characters. And I mean, this is our lives. So just to be clear, these characters came out of my life and my question about my life very early on. Am I going to have a life of security or am I going to have a life of freedom? And they became two characters who became A and B, and then that became Alpha and Beta, and then became Althea and Boris. And they really were always two sides of me asking this question. And so it's fascinating, and I'm assuming that other people have this same question, and yet each of them have an addictive quality. Althea is inside the cage, and and is terrified, is longing and constantly trying to figure out how to get out, and longing and how she can fly and stuff like that. But when the chance comes, she'll do anything not to do it. So there's that addictive isolation. And Boris is just as addicted to the ambition to find this cage at all costs, and will do anything, even murder, to get into it. So you have those two sides of characters, and I say they're addictive because they're being pulled by something that is like Althea's fear, Boris's ambition. And ultimately it is through each other, through human connection, because they're bird people, that they are able to do this, both the most terrifying thing and also the most liberating thing, in which they become whole. And I was just talking to the director yesterday, and we were talking about their characters, because we're just about to give the character breakdown to the casting director. And we were saying it's almost like they're children with, children's impulses, but grown up and sophisticated and complex. And gee, I wonder how many of us are like that.
I think everybody. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that Jung says about archetypes, and his definition are simplistic, a condensation. Jung he was dense, and he defined things many different ways because he was always in evolution himself. I love Jung's work because it was not static. It's not like he decreed this is what it is and stopped. He continued doing his research and letting his ideas evolve over time. But The archetypes are universal templates with ideas and images and emotions that operate in all of us. And the instincts are the biological pushes and impulses that embody or house the archetypes, the universal ideas, images, and emotions. And he says every archetype is bipolar. It has a dark side and a light side, a creative side and a destructive side, a trapped, secure side, and a free, wide open side. It's all bipolar. And in truth, being human somehow means finding a middle way that we can have enough security to really be free, and that we can have enough freedom to develop the kind of security we really want and need. But we get caught with internalized ideas about those things and internalized experiences vis-a-vis our history that can obscure that for us. So, for instance, the security and freedom I need is going to be unique to me. The security and freedom you need, we have to shape it. Now, there may be some commonalities. We all need shelter, we need food. I mean, they're basic, there are similarities, but each of us have to find our own way with that. I've been self-employed for 30 some years, and I've had a solo office for that long. And the idea of having to share office space, or that I would have to go back in and report, I mean, that just was, I needed more freedom than that. But I also have needed the security of a constancy of a work schedule, of referral sources, of client base. So, we each have to find our own way with it. And, but they both are essential energies in our psyche. And the problem that we get into, and that your characters exemplify in the beginning stage, which is very much a quality of childishness, is one-sidedness. It's either this way or this way. Or what often, again, we talk about as black and white thinking. It's all or nothing. When in true, it's both.
Well, that's very interesting, because the function, how the cage magic works, meaning what turns it from a great dream into a trap, is really only one thing, which is when you trap yourself inside it, when you click it. So if you can keep that open, that gives you the opportunity to have both freedom and you can, it is a home, it is a place, but not when you're trapped inside of it. And my sense is that so many of us, me for sure, get trapped inside it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we really can, it truly does feel, it might be just a little thing in our lives, or maybe it's our whole life. It truly does feel like I can't do that. That's a cement wall right there. And what I think, what's really powerful to me about the subject today that you suggested, is that once we actually do start fulfilling a dream, which is what I'm in the middle of, the reality is very different from the fantasy. In the fantasy, it's smooth, it's easy, the flight is working. In reality, I'm bringing a lot of turbulence. And I'm bringing a lot of resistance,
Right.
even if I don't want to, in years of having not lived our dream. So I know that there are so many people. I know there are many people in Hip Harp Academy, and also in your work, both as a psychoanalyst and in the Inner Divine Spirit. And that's what they're there for.
Right.
They're there to take that dream and turn it from fantasy to reality. So let's talk about, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but in this session, mind you, much time in the world, what we can each think about. I'm really taken by this idea of when we do take the leap, when you sign up for a program, you make a commitment, or you sign up for something, you put your name on the dotted line. That is a way of for me, that's a way of pushing
Mm-hmm.
myself and saying, yep, I'm going to do this. If I didn't do that, I would back out over and over and over and over again. So I have to do that. That's the first thing. But now we can forget the pull. I can forget
Mm-hmm.
what the pull is. So how can you talk just a little bit more about that pull towards our true nature and how to reconnect with it and stay in connection?
Yes, because the pull really comes from the fire or the passion that started the project and that was the motivation to sign on the dotted line. That when our ego gets so caught up in the details and trying to sort the outer world, we can easily lose connection with that inner passion for what it is that really matters most. And so, how we get pulled forward is paradox, is we stay close to the fire. The fire being the passion that we have to share, the passion that we have to share, which always means connection. Sharing, think about it. The word inherent in the whole idea or image of sharing is connection with someone else, or a sentient being.
And sometimes we can feel at like that we are at odds with others as we go
Mm-hmm.
into this. So how can we turn that around? How can we look for and it might not be people, it might be things. I mean, good
Right.
technology, it could be anything that you're experiencing a sense of struggle with. Uh, uh, Including not getting us sleep or whatever it is, your schedule.
Right.
How can What would be a good thought for us or a good mind experiment for and almost putting the fire over there or looking for the fire over there as well as within us, so that we can be seeing the beauty and really um, uh, seeing the pull in others as well as just within ourselves, so that we can make that connection with that human connection.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is we have to contain our own fire enough and be clear about our passion and our intention. And I refer to it as our sacred intention for sharing, and contain that enough to feel confident and secure enough that we can be open to hear what is the other person's passion and fire for being a part of this, because our fire and our passion and sacred intention may be different from theirs. Now, we also have to find what is the common ground. The common ground in this case with your play may be a successful rendering of the movement and the energies and the images in a way that touches people. So, I don't know. But
Well, actually, I mean, I think that the intention of everybody, from the theater owner to the person taking tickets to the audience to the marketing person to the director, I think every person's in is to bring it alive, is to actually breathe the in their own way. Even if that's an audience member, that's by going in and suspending disbelief and being there. If it's the marketing
Mhm.
person, it's by bringing people there and giving them enough of the story that they know the kind of thing they're coming to. And that is the breath of life. I mean, it's that.
Mhm. So then in a way, what you're saying is that the fire is that common spirit, the spirit of the collective in this case, that wants to bring to life the play in a way that each person involved in each, whether the involvement is acting or viewing in the seat, has a living experience of it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking now about technology as well. Like I'm thinking
Mhm.
about the dream of Joël Garnier, the man who originally built the DHC harp, and what his when I asked him his dream, it was to create the greatest instruments for artists so that their voice could be in the world.
Mhm.
That was his dream, to have his instruments played by artists and have his instruments empower and liberate and inspire
Yeah,
artists.
yeah.
And I know that the technology companies that I struggle with sometimes, their dream would be that people were using their technology to actually
Mm-hmm.
fulfill their dreams. And that can get lost in the minutia.
Yes, it can.
Um,
Yes, it can.
and so what I'm hearing you say is that to look for that in everything, like
Mm-hmm.
from the plumber who wants your water to be clear and pure, and to the, to the ticket takers, to every person who's involved in your life, and to actually be looking for how they are breathing, how they are breathing life into my life, into my fantasy, bringing reality into my fantasy.
And in the process, changing your fantasy to become a shared fantasy. And this
Right.
is, I think, a part of collaboration that we have to surrender to, is that when we collaborate, we have a fantasy about what's going to happen. The other has a fantasy, and somewhere, if we can come together and surrender our fantasies, together we can image something more whole. Together something can be born that is greater. And I think this is what can be difficult for those of us who are used to working solo.
Right. And
Yeah,
I think you've really hit on as we step out of isolation and
right.
into relationships with other people in any capacity, sadly, we bring ourselves. And
Well, yeah, and I just want to say for a minute, and what we're talking about applies everywhere. I mean, think about if you've been living alone. I lived alone for 10 years between my marriages. Then I got married, and my husband John has a very different idea of housekeeping than I do. So all of a sudden, we're having to deal with these different realities of how we approach things, and find a shared way that leaves enough room for both of us. So this applies everywhere. It applies to when we get in the car to drive to the office, and all of a sudden there's traffic, and our imagination and our fantasy wasn't going to be there. And so again, this whole idea of having enough security that we can let things in and be changed by it, and we can venture out and be changed by it, and in the process change other people for good. I mean, that's really
yeah, I want to go back to what you said, a shared way that has space for both. And then bring in what you just said, which is because that that is what brings life. That's what brings reality in the terms of shared reality and actuality, and maybe actuality to fantasy, which is
right.
always going to be bumpier, and is always going to and yet is always going to have more impact because it's actually in the world,
Yeah,
imperfectly in the world, perfectly in fantasy, imperfectly in the world.
yeah, and I know we're going to have to wrap up, but a thought that stuck with me from our last conversation a couple of weeks ago is the idea, and I wrote this down, and I was going to text you and thank you, but I never got around to that. The idea of embodiment is improvisation. And I've been thinking about how this idea of how we live with our body, our head gets all these ideas. Well, then we have a body that has a whole different experience sometimes. And that,
Right.
it's kind of like, how do we honor both? How do we live in that shared space? And even with the harp, I sit down and I finally learned not to quit playing every time I make a quote mistake and hit a wrong note. It took me years. I got to know a bad habit. And now sometimes I hit the wrong note. I'm like, oh my God, how beautiful. What a nice variation in that tune that was. So,
Hmm.
this whole idea of this shared creation has so many applications, and that fulfilling our dreams is not just a head trip and ego driven, but it really does mean being grounded in the realities of our body, the realities of our psyche, the realities of other people and their psyches. And anyway,
Well,
yeah.
I just want to come in on that because you're reminding me that when I was first learning the harp as an adult, the relationship of what I imagined I could do and what I could actually do was that was an incredible negotiation that I had to go through. And sometimes the head had to let the body, or sometimes the head would convince the body to do it. It wasn't at all perfect, but at least the body got to experience the fluency of it. And then there was the hours and hours and days and months and years of just trying to connect the two.
And there's the reality that is required to fulfill the dream versus the fantasy. So maybe a place we might wind up, and we can always put a pause and start back next week, is that if we are going to fulfill our dreams, then we have to give up our fantasies of what it's going to look like and let the realities shape what happens. And that doesn't mean it's going to be less than. That's also a false belief we have. And so to be courageous and be willing to be pushed out of our cages and to hit the obstacles, knowing this is just part of the process. And that, of course, this doesn't look like what I thought it was going to. And that's okay. How do I meet this obstacle, this reality, and let that fire in me keep pulling me forward?
Beautiful. And I would say that to also then, as we surrender to this, to actually look, this is what I'm telling myself, to look for the breath of life that is the wind that lifts us, and that is in each person, and be looking for that instead of anything that's not working. Look for that, only look for that, keep being pulled by that.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Kathleen, thank you so much. And Paul, was it Pauline? I'm going to come back. Pauline, yes, thank you for your wonderful comments. And to everybody else who's listening live and who listens afterwards and who sends us wonderful texts and messages. Mostly, Kathleen, thank you for a conversation that I have loved from the beginning and that I love it will keep going. And I look forward to seeing all of you, meaning all of Kathleen and all of everyone else, next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. What? I don't know if we weren't, no, we were live, but I don't know if I hit it.
I want to say I didn't see live come up, and I started to mention something. Then Pauline put in a comment, so I thought, well, we must be live. But there was, I don't know. We'll see if we got recorded or what.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. We will see. But in any case, Dina, great. Thanks for being here. And Pauline, it was great. Somehow we were connected somewhere, but who knows what was happening. Yeah. But it was, I hope it was recorded because I want to go back and listen to it.
Yeah. So Riam is saying, yes, they were live. Dina says, I can barely see these little prints.
But you guys can, here's
okay, so we're still live.
Yeah, wait, but it says go live. And then it says, if I click it, unable to go live, it seems you are already streaming. To go streaming, stop the ongoing live stream. Well, there's no stop button. We will have to be here for.
Yes, you are still live. Where are we live at? Are we live on YouTube or Facebook? Or maybe someone will tell us where we're live.
But we can't stop.
I guess we're just going to have to sign off. Thank you, everybody.
Yes. Oh, on YouTube, on Facebook. Oh, we said on YouTube, on Facebook. Well, hopefully it will get recorded, and thank you for being here. All right. And see you next week, one way or the other. Okay, great. I think I'm just going to close this and see what happens. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, people are still here. I went away and I came back, so now I can end it. I'll give that a try. You sure you want to end the stream?